moments, exploding into a wild combination of exaggerations, embellishments, and even lies. Lepp will make you wonder, ponder, and most of all laugh at his extraordinary tall tales. Lepp just returned from the National Storytelling Festival in Tennessee via Zoom, adding to the many storytelling events he has participated in during these months of COVID. Lepp lives in the beautiful state of West Virginia with his wife, children, and dog, Apollo. He is a nationally renowned storyteller, not only a 5-time Lyre champ, but also an author of 25 publications, including the award-winning children's book, The King of Little Things. Bill's outrageous, humorous, tall tales and witty stories have earned the appreciation of listeners of all ages and from all walks of life. Though a champion liar, his stories often contain morsels of truth, which shed light on universal themes. Lepp explains that while his stories may not be completely true, they are always honest. According to Barbara McBride Smith, Bil Lepp is the wonder bra of storytelling. He takes something small and insignificant and pushes it up like something really big and mighty interesting. And I couldn't say it better myself if I tried. Now let's give a big welcome to Bil Lepp and plan to stick around for the Q&A after the performance.
I guess I need to unmute myself. Thank you all for joining me, and for Jess, thanks for having me, to the Susquehanna Folk people. Thank you so much. I am Bil Lepp, and I am 5-time champion of the West Virginia Lyres Contest. And for those of you that don't know what that is, the Lyres Contest is held in Charleston, West Virginia every year over the Memorial Day weekend as part of a larger gathering called the Vandalia Gathering, which is a celebration of traditional Appalachian arts and culture. So there are banjo contests and fiddle contests, quilting contests, that kind of thing. In about 1983, a man named Dr. Ken Sullivan decided that since oral history had played such an important role in Appalachian culture, there ought to be some sort of storytelling facet to the Vandalia Gathering, so he introduced the idea of the Lyres Contest. He did tell me that he had to promise the powers that be that it would be an amateur contest only, and that therefore politicians would not be allowed to enter. Now, the first year that I won the Lyres Contest, aside from being a champion liar, I also served 4 years as a United Methodist pastor. And the first year that I won the Lyres Contest, a Presbyterian pastor won 2nd place, and another Methodist minister won 3rd place. So they did consider banning clergy as well after that. I then got a job working for the West Virginia Division of Culture and History, which runs the Lyres Contest. Therefore, I could no longer enter the Lyres Contest. But I think that does go to show you that if you lie well enough, long enough, eventually the government will hire you. Now, this has been my full-time job for about the last 18 years. I get to travel all over the country telling stories. And several years ago, I was out in Ojai, California. And Ojai, if you don't know, sits about 800 feet up in the mountains. It's about, 13 miles inland from Ventura Beach. If you do know, don't contradict me. And I was staying in a little cabin, and behind my cabin, there were several thousand acres of land, which a local nature conservancy had purchased, and they'd run a whole bunch of hiking trails through there. So I got up one morning and decided I'd take a hike. Well, I got to the parking lot, and there was a notice board, and in the middle of that notice board, there was an 8x10 computer printout with a color picture of a very ferocious-looking mountain lion on it. And the sign said, "Warning, mountain lions have been spotted in this area." Well, I'm from Charleston, West Virginia. We don't have a lot of mountain lions in Charleston. So I took this more as a precursor to an adventure than an actual warning. But the sign went on to describe what you should do if you encounter a mountain lion. And the first thing it said you're supposed to do is to try and look as big as possible. Now, you can't really see me here, but I don't have a lot of big working for me. And then it said you should stare the mountain lion in the eyes and back away as slowly as possible. And the third thing it said was if the mountain lion attacks, and I thought this was particularly prudent, it said if the mountain lion attacks, fight back. Made good sense to me. And then the last thing the sign said, and you could tell that somebody's mother had written the sign, because the last thing it said was, do not hike alone. Well, I didn't have anybody with me, so I started hiking. And sure enough, about 10 minutes later, I came around a curve in the path. And there, standing in the middle of the path, with his claws out and his fangs bared, was the biggest, meanest, ugliest, nastiest chipmunk that I have ever seen. But right behind that chipmunk with his claws out and his fangs bared was the biggest, meanest, ugliest, nastiest mountain lion I had ever seen. And both of them were pretty happy to see me, because that chipmunk knew that he wasn't going to be breakfast anymore. And that mountain lion knew that he was going to get a lot more to eat than he had been planning on. So the first thing that happened was that chipmunk shot off into the underbrush. And the next thing I knew, I was staring eye to eye with a hungry mountain lion. Well, I knew that I was supposed to try and look as big as possible, but that seemed sort of counterproductive to me. So I just sort of turned sideways, sucked in my gut, and pulled up my t-shirt. I wanted that mountain lion to see my ribs. I wanted him to think that I was the breakfast equivalent of a Pop-Tart, a pre-wrapped pastry not worth going to any trouble for. But apparently that's exactly what he was in the mood for, because he crouched down and got ready to spring. Well, I realized I was going to have to fight this mountain lion, and I don't know about you, but I had never fought a mountain lion before. And the only thing I could think to do was what Tarzan does in Edgar Rice Burroughs novels when he fights lions. And what Tarzan does is he crouches down like this, and when the lion springs, Tarzan gets up under his front legs, turns him around, puts him in a full Nelson, and knocks him out. Well, it wasn't much, but it was all I had. And I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, Tarzan's a lot bigger than you, buddy. But then I figure Africa lions are a lot bigger than California lions, so I was hoping the ratio would work out. So I crouched down, and just before that lion sprang, I managed to reach in my pocket and pull out my stainless steel 74 function Swiss Army type knife. Now, I didn't have time to open anything up, but I had it in my hand. And when that lion sprung, I got up under his front legs, turned him around, put him in a full Nelson, and I was doing everything I could to knock him out. And to be honest, he was pretty angry. But I think he was a lot more embarrassed than he was angry. I mean, just imagine walking into your kitchen one morning and a Pop-Tart jumps up out of the toaster, puts you in a full Nelson, pile drives you into the linoleum. It didn't help matters that there was a chipmunk standing beside the path going, nah, 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 nah. But I was still doing everything I could to knock him out. Nothing was working. And that's when I remembered that I had been a pastor for 4 years. And I thought what I ought to do is I ought to preach to this mountain lion. Because I knew from 200 Sundays in the pulpit experience that a lot of times if you preach to someone, one of two things will happen. You'll either save them or you'll put them to sleep. Either alternative seemed all right for me. Now, before I started preaching to that mountain lion, opened up on my Swiss Army knife, there's a copy of the New Testament, and there's some vestments. Because it's not just a Swiss Army knife, it's also a Salvation Army knife. I know, it's a long way to go for that joke, but I think it's worth it. So I laid into that mountain lion. I gave him some Samson. I gave him some Daniel. I was coming around the corner into Nero when I looked down and he was sound asleep. One of my most effective sermons ever. But I still didn't know what to do with him because I was afraid if I just laid him down, he might wake right back up. But more than that, he'd only had about 5 minutes of the word. So he was in a very fragile theological condition. I was out in California. Who knew who the next person down the path was going to be? Could have been a Unitarian or something, and I just couldn't have that on my conscience. So I decided what I ought to do is I ought to baptize that mountain lion. So I got him up on my hip because, you know, I know from vast experience that a lot of times if you baptize someone, you will never see them again. So I got him up on my hip. I started making my way back towards the edge of the Ventura River, got ready to baptize that mountain lion. But that's when it dawned on me, I didn't know what denomination that mountain lion was. Now, I'm a Methodist, so we sprinkle. But I figure anybody that got converted as quickly as that mountain lion did almost had to be a Baptist. And that worried me too, because that meant when the service was over, he is going to be hungry all over again. So I knew I was going to have to go for the full bore dunking. So I got him up on my hip. I made my way into the water. I said the words you're supposed to say, and then boom, down we went. Well, when we came up out of the water, that mountain lion was angrier than he had been all day. Didn't seem at all like someone who had just experienced the peace of Christ in his life. And right away, I knew what the problem was. Mountain lions are cats. Cats have 9 lives. That probably means they have 9 souls. That meant I was going to have to baptize that mountain lion 8 more times. Well, we were coming out of the water on about the 7th turn when I looked up on the shore and I saw, standing on the bank of the river, an angelic figure with its back to the sun, long flowing hair, sunlight sort of dappling through, kind of a halo over the head. And then I heard a most unangelic voice that said, "Unhand that mountain lion." And she turned. I could see it was a woman, and she was wearing the uniform of a member of the California Department of Natural Resources. And she said, "Don't you know that it's illegal in California to force your religion on a wild animal?" And then she reached in her back pocket and pulled out her wallet. She flipped it open and had her badge in it. And about 16 of those little plastic card-carrying cards had like her Vegans Anonymous card and her Herbal Tea Drinkers of America card and her Non-Proliferation of Human Religions Amongst Animals card. And all the way down at the bottom there were some ashes that I'm pretty sure were from the bra that she had burned in 1968. She said, "I want you to release that mountain lion into my protective custody at this moment." And I swear to you, that mountain lion turned around and looked at me, and he said, "Don't let her protect me." So he and I worked out a quick deal. I let him go. He went one way and I went the other. And there's really no end to this story, except to say that if you're ever out in California and you meet a mountain lion and all else fails, you might just want to ask him if he's a Christian. The end. Thank you very much. Now, thank you. When you're a little kid, I mean little, like 3, 4 years old, the world can be a very confusing place because you have a limited vocabulary. And everything that you hear, you have to filter through the few words that you know and try and make sense of it. Like when my daughter was probably 3 years old, she was finally starting to understand time, like that not everything happens today. You remember that old Eagle song, "Life in the Fast Lane"? There's that line, everything all the time. A lot of people think that's about doing cocaine. I think it's about being 3, because everything happens all the time when you're 3. But my daughter had just nailed her first shaky piton into the wall of understanding time. And she finally figured out that not everything happens today. But the only other day that she could both understand and articulate was yesterday. So she would ask me questions like, "Daddy, are we going to Grandma's house today or yesterday?" And I, being the sort of father that I am, would say yesterday. And we would both be happy because I think I'm hilarious and she thought she was a Time Lord. So my worst Christmas ever started just after Christmas when I was 4 years old. I guess for the first time in my life, I noticed that my dad had a bald spot on the back of his head. And I said, "Dad, how'd you get that bald spot?" And he said, "Well, on Christmas Eve, I heard a noise on the roof. And I walked outside, and when I stepped out from under the carport, I felt something lick the back of my head. And I turned around, and there was Rudolph on the roof. He had licked the hair right off of my head. And Dad said, if I ever see Rudolph again, I am going to shoo him away." Well, I was 4, and that was not an expression with which I was familiar. And when I filtered it through the few things that I knew, what I heard my father say was, if I ever see Rudolph again, I am going to shoot him anyway. And I thought, oh dear, Dad's going to kill Rudolph. That could put a damper on next Christmas. And I worried about that for the next week or so, but I was 4, so I didn't think about it that long. And I didn't think about it again until the holiday season rolled around the next year. Now, when you're an adult and you're jaded and you've lost all hope, when you hear someone say the holiday season, you think to yourself, oh, that incredibly stressful period of time between Thanksgiving and Christmas. But when you're a child and there is still joy and hope in the world, children know that the first and probably second most important holiday in the holiday season is in fact Halloween, because that's the other day that we get free stuff. So as Halloween started to roll around, I started to remember that my dad had sworn this vendetta against Rudolph. And I wanted to know if Dad still intended to kill Rudolph, but if Dad had forgotten about it, I didn't want to remind him. So I started to ask a series of surreptitious questions. I would say, for example, Dad, do you even own a gun? And he said, no, but I could get one. And I said, do you even hunt? And he said, no, but sometimes at the barber, I read Field and Stream. And then I asked a question that there was no possible way he could see through. I said, Dad, is it even legal to shoot a deer on your roof? Now, I don't know about the urban deer population where you live, but where I live, if that deer's on your roof, that's your deer. So I was seriously worried that Dad was going to kill Rudolph. On top of that, we were about to have a presidential election. And I heard my neighbor say, if Jimmy Carter gets elected president, the entire country is going to hell. And I was 5 years old. I had a very narrow and a very theological understanding of hell. And I thought if Jimmy Carter got elected president, the people in Canada and the people in Mexico were just going to pull out the pins. And the entire continental United States was just going to drop into the sulfuric pits of hell. And then Jimmy Carter did get elected. So Dad was going to kill Rudolph. Jimmy Carter was taking us down. I didn't even know if we were going to make it to Christmas. And about the only thing I had going for me at this point was I was going to kindergarten, and my teacher, we had this wonderful teacher. She was from our little town of $50 West Virginia, but she had gone off to Columbia or Harvard or someplace like that, and she'd gotten all full of liberal, and she'd come home. And this was right at the end of the hippie era. And she wasn't just a carrier, okay? She had it. And she decided that she was going to teach all of these 5-year-olds about world religions. Now, you might think world religions is a pretty heady topic for a bunch of kindergartners. But you have to understand that there was going to be glue, glitter, and macaroni involved. So the first thing she told us was that not all children in the world celebrated Christmas. And we were shocked. I don't think anyone had ever told us that before. I grew up, I'm not apologizing for it or making excuses, but I grew up in a very white, very Christian community. We had the Methodist Church, your variety pack of Baptist churches, and our parents told us there were some Catholics that lived over the hill. But we didn't know if that was true or if that was just something they told us so we'd go to bed at night. But anyway, she told us that not all children in the world celebrated Christmas, and we were shocked. Not in a, oh no, those children don't know Jesus kind of way, but more of a, oh no, those kids aren't going to get free stuff on Christmas morning, because, you know, we were Americans first. And then we were studying Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, all of these different religions. And so that we could better understand some of the things that these people did and celebrated, like, for example, when we were studying Ramadan in Islam, where they fast for 40 days during daylight hours, so that we could get a feel for that, one day we skipped snack. And then we knew what it was like to fast for 40 days. Her heart was in the right place. And we were going to make a menorah, and we were going to make a Santa Claus Christmas tree ornament. And I wanted to make that Santa Claus Christmas tree ornament so bad for several reasons. One, I knew if I did a good job on it, I could give it to my mom as a Christmas present, and she would hang it on the Christmas tree where the best ornaments go, which is, of course, the back of the Christmas tree. But also, I thought if I did a really good job on it, Santa Claus would sense that. And even if Dad did kill Rudolph, this would be like a positive talisman, a positive voodoo doll, world religions. And Santa would know that I had worked really hard on this image of him. And so even if Dad did kill Rudolph, maybe Santa wouldn't visit the sins of the father on the son. And then one day in this time period, we were playing hide and seek at my house, and I was looking for a place to hide. And my big brother was on the couch. He had the measles, and he was under a blanket watching TV. And I thought, I know where I will hide. I will hide under the blanket of the measles victim. I thought, what idiot would look under the blanket of the measles victim? It never occurred to me, what moron would hide under the blanket of the measles victim? Well, nobody found me. In fact, I didn't see anybody for about 2 weeks but my mother and the doctor. And when I finally went back to school, they had already made the Santa Clauses. And I said to my teacher, can I make a Santa Claus? And she said, we've moved past that, but you can make a menorah. And I thought, I had the measles, not my bar mitzvah. And so, and also, you know, before you get too emotionally involved, remember, most of this is made up. So I went home. I didn't get to make the Santa Claus. Jimmy Carter was taking us down. Dad was going to kill Rudolph. I am the last of 5 children. I don't know if you're the last of a long line of children, but if you are, you know that it doesn't take long to figure out that your parents really just don't care that much anymore. My mother's sympathy tank was empty. If I wanted any sympathy at all, I had to lose a limb and it not be my own fault. So I went home and I said, Mom, I didn't get to make the Santa Claus. And she said something like, whatever doesn't kill you, will put hair on your chest. So then the only thing I had going for me is Mom had said that a lady in the church had given her tickets so that we could go to the Charleston Symphony Hall. And I was so excited. And you might wonder why a 5-year-old was excited to be going to the Symphony Hall. Well, it wasn't just going to the Symphony Hall. It was what we were going to see. Mom said that we were going to see Elephant Gerald. Now, you have to understand, when I was a little kid, I loved elephants. I had elephant knickknacks. I had elephant bed sheets. I had elephant posters. My favorite book was Babar. I loved elephants. And I didn't know who Elephant Gerald was, but I was excited to go see an elephant. And then Mom said that Elephant Gerald was a musician and that she had played with Count Basie and Duke Ellington and Louis Armstrong. And I didn't really know who those people were either, but I knew that you had to be pretty famous if you had played with a Duke, a Count, and the first man on the moon. And then I thought, how do elephants even play music? Do they stick their trunk out like this and another elephant plays it like a flute? Or do they stick it out in front of them and play it like a trumpet or curve it like a saxophone? And then, oh, my most intoxicating idea. I thought maybe the elephant comes out on stage and it's wearing a kilt and it takes its trunk, puts it in its own mouth, blows itself up, and then squeezes so music comes out the back. I was looking forward to this. So finally, it was the night of the big show, and my mom told me to go downstairs and get dressed, and she had laid out an outfit on my bed, and I didn't want to wear what she had laid out because I had a 3-piece suit. And not only did I have a 3-piece suit, but I had assembled it myself. Because I knew that to have a 3-piece suit, you had to have pants, a jacket, and a vest made out of the same material. Well, I had grown up wearing tough-skin blue jeans. I had a blue jean jacket, and I had recently acquired a denim vest. So I put that on. I've also recently learned that that is called a Canadian tuxedo. And I put that on, and I went upstairs, and my mother took one look at me, and she said, no. So I had to go downstairs and put on what she wanted me to wear. And then we got in the car, and we drove to the Symphony Hall. It was a long drive, and we got there. Oh my gosh, I'd never been in any place so spectacular. There were men in tuxedos, actual tuxedos, women in evening gowns. We went in, we sat down, I was fidgeting in my chair. Finally, the lights started to dim, the curtains opened, and what I assumed was the opening act came out on stage. It was a Rubenesque, middle-aged African-American woman, and she sang a song about a knife named Mac. And when that was done, I looked at my mother and I said, "Where's the elephant?" And she said, "Shh." And then the lady sang, I don't know, sleigh bells. And I said, "Where's the elephant?" And she sang another song, and this kept going on, and I was getting more and more insistent. "Where's the elephant? Where's the elephant?" And my mom was getting more and more upset. Shh, till the people around us were starting to get annoyed. And then she sang a tisket a tasket, and she left the stage, and the curtains closed, and the lights came on, and we were in the car going home. And I was in the back seat crying like only a child can cry. I wanted to see the elephant. And my parents were like, "What is wrong with you?" And I said, hold on a second. And I said, "I wanted to see the elephant." And they said, "What elephant?" And I said, "Elephant Gerald." And they just burst out laughing, the way that adults do when a child has entirely misunderstood the world. It's like when my wife was a little kid. She wasn't my wife yet. It's just the easiest way to describe the situation. My wife grew up in Yazoo County, Mississippi, which is flat, flat, flat for as far as the eye can see. And so one summer, her parents took her and her sister to the Great Smoky Mountains so that they could see what not flat looked like. And they were going up the Smoky Mountains, and my mother-in-law said, "Oh, my ears just popped." And my sister-in-law said, "Oh, my ears just popped." And my wife said, "My ears have not popped. What will happen if my ears don't pop?" And her dad said, "Your head will explode." Hilarious. So Dad was going to kill Rudolph. Jimmy Carter was taking us down. I didn't get to make the Santa Claus. There was no elephant. And then we had to go visit Aunt Lenore. Bless her heart. I don't know if you have an Aunt Lenore. She wasn't actually a member of our family. She was sort of grafted onto our family. She was my grandmother's friend, and she didn't have any family of her own, so she sort of adopted us as surrogate grandchildren. And each year for Christmas, she would knit me and my brothers and sisters and my cousins, all 13 of us, she would knit us each a pair of slippers. But I was about 9 years old before I realized that they were slippers, because they weren't foot-shaped. They were football-shaped, and the hole was in the middle. So there was foot in front of the hole and foot behind the hole. And I don't know anybody that has foot in front of the hole and foot behind the hole, except the Charlie Brown characters, and I don't think I'm related to them. So we had to go see Aunt Lenore, because let's face it, Christmas is the time when you go visit people who you really just don't like. And the subtext is so clear, because you knock on the door and you're like, "Merry Christmas." And then you're like, in parentheses, "I would visit you more often if I liked you." And then you had to hug Aunt Lenore. Now, Aunt Lenore had that particular old lady smell, not the general old lady smell. Most old ladies smell like lilacs, but Aunt Lenore had that particular old lady smell that is equal parts mothballs and cat urine. And so then you had to hug Aunt Lenore. And hugging Aunt Lenore, God bless you, Aunt Lenore, hugging Aunt Lenore was like hugging an old Christmas tree, because chances are you were going to get poked, you were probably going to come away sticky, and if you weren't gentle, you'd break off a limb. And finally, it was about, 3 days before Christmas. I was walking around my house. I was all alone. Nobody else was there. As I said, I'm the last of 5 children. And when you're the last of 5 children, nobody ever gets tired of telling you that you are everyone's responsibility, which is code for you are no one's responsibility. People just assumed that everybody else was teaching me things. I was 27 years old before I knew the difference between my elbow and my shoulder. And so sometimes I would just find myself home alone. It wasn't neglect. It was the 70s. So I walked in the living room, and there was the Christmas tree. And under the Christmas tree, there were already some presents, and some of those presents were for me. And I thought, we might not even make it to Christmas. I might as well see what I was going to get. So I opened those presents, I looked at them, and then I rewrapped them. Now, my mother is a meticulous wrapper, which is in no way a hip-hop reference. But I wrapped those presents the best I could, and I put them back under the tree. And finally, it was Christmas Eve. And I was laying in my bed and I had warring emotions going on. I was anxious and I was excited. I was anxious because there were just a few hours left. If we could just get through those few hours, we could make it to Christmas. But so much could go wrong. Dad could kill Rudolph. Jimmy Carter could take us down. And I was excited because there was just a few hours left. If we could go just a few more hours without Dad killing Rudolph, without Jimmy Carter taking us down, we were going to make it to Christmas. So I lay there with those warring emotions battling back and forth. And then I don't know if I dreamt it or I imagined it or if it actually happened, but I heard the screen door go foom, foom, and then I heard blam. And I thought, oh no, he did it. He killed Rudolph. And then I must have fallen asleep because I woke up, and that's evidence that you fell asleep. It's like, what? I'm driving. And in my family, I don't know how it happens in your family, but in my family, Santa does not leave the stockings hung by the chimney with care. Santa brings the stocking in and lays it down beside your bed, or beside you in your bed, so that when you wake up in the morning, your stocking's right there. And we always got the same thing in our stockings because my parents, my Großpapa, which is German for grandfather, has no reflection on his personal hygiene. My parents, my Großpapa, and Santa Claus worked in conjunction every year to fill our stockings. So we always got the same thing. For my parents, we got a walnut and an orange because they had lived through the Depression and they wanted us to know how miserable their Christmases had been. And then from Großpapa, each grandchild got a prescription bottle full of coins. Throughout the course of the year, Großpapa saved all of his prescription bottles, and he would fill them with coins, and each grandchild got a prescription bottle full of coins. But Großpapa was not interested in equal pay. You got whatever coin fit the diameter of that bottle. So one kid was going to get like $1.20 in dimes, and he took some enormous pill, and the jar was big enough to put an Eisenhower dollar in. So one kid was going to get 20 bucks. One kid was going to get $1.20. Großpapa didn't care as long as everybody got a canister of coins. And he didn't wash the prescription bottles out. So about halfway through Christmas, your mom would be like, take that dime out of your mouth. And you'd be like, but it feels so good. And then from Santa Claus, each kid in my family got 2 packets of flavored Quaker oatmeal. Now, I don't know why we only got flavored Quaker oatmeal at Christmas because it costs the same as regular oatmeal. But every Christmas, we got, each kid in my family got 1 packet of maple and brown sugar and 1 packet of cinnamon and apples flavored oatmeal. And that was our breakfast meal on Christmas morning. So I woke up and until I was about 11, I wet the bed. You know, not continuously. I got some other things done. But that night, I had wet the bed. So my oatmeal had already begun. And I thought, oh, that's awful because this is supposed to be my Christmas breakfast. So when nobody's looking, I got to switch that out with one of my sister's or brother's oatmeal packages. And then I went upstairs and I opened my presents. And some of them weren't what they were supposed to be. And I know what they were supposed to be because I had opened them 3 days ago. Like I opened one that was supposed to be a basketball, and now it was just a pillow wrapped up in duct tape. And I opened another one, and I don't remember what it was supposed to be, but I remember clearly saying, this isn't supposed to be a 12-ounce can of mixed vegetables. And then I had to learn a valuable lesson. And let's face it, Christmas is no day to learn a valuable lesson. So that night, as I lay in bed, I know what I wasn't thinking. I wasn't thinking I should be grateful because as miserable as my Christmas was, there were people who had way worse Christmases and always will. And I should be thankful that I have parents who think about me or love me, you know, when they remember me, and that I have teachers who really want to broaden my mind, and that I have relatives who take care of the marginalized people on society like Aunt Lenore and make sure that they feel loved and included, and I should be thankful that I have food to eat and a roof over my head and a nice, safe, warm bed to pee in. But I didn't think that because I was 5 years old. And I know what I wish I was thinking, but there was no way I could have articulated this. What I wish I was thinking was that almost all of these problems that I had came because I misunderstood something. And I bet 98% of the problems in the world are caused by us misunderstanding things. And sometimes I think we deliberately misunderstand things. We see someone walking toward us and we think, I don't like that person. I don't like them because of the color of their skin. I don't like who they love. I don't like how they love. I don't like the God they worship. I don't like the person they vote for. I don't care what that person says. I'm not going to even pay attention to what they say. And I think if we would take maybe 5 minutes out of our day and really try and listen to other people, try and figure out where they're coming from, try and actually understand them, I bet we could solve 89% of the problems in the world. But I didn't think that because I was 5. What I thought was, this is the worst Christmas ever. The end. All right. These stories are always shorter when the audience isn't actually there laughing. I'm going to do one more for you, and then I think we're going to open it up for a question and answer. Again, I got into the Liars Contest. I got into storytelling through the Liars Contest, and that happened because my older brother, Paul, who has since passed away, he started doing the Liars Contest when I was about 16 years old. And I watched him do it for several years, and you win $100. So I totally went into the arts for the money. And then you also win a scale-sized golden barn shovel for shoveling stuff. And I watched my brother do the Liars Contest for 3 or 4 years, and I thought, you know what, I can do that. And so I started doing the Liars Contest. But this is his story. It was the second one he won the Liars Contest with, but I think it's a story for which he is most famous. There stands a bridge in Fayette County, West Virginia. It's the longest single-span arch bridge in the world, and it's the longest single-span arch bridge in the world and the second tallest bridge in North America. It's called the New River Gorge Bridge, and if you've never been to see it, you owe yourself a trip because it's quite a sight. But I am speaking from experience when I tell you that you should never, ever, for any reason, stop in the middle of that bridge. You see, it was the second Saturday in May. I had just woken up. There was no particular significance to the day, except that I realized it was already May, and I had yet to go fishing that entire year. I figured I owed myself a trip down to the Marmot Locks to do a little carp fishing. So I threw all my gear in my car, the Great Golden Carp Cruiser, the GC for short, and I headed out. Now, I only had $5 in my pocket. So when I stopped at the local 7-Eleven, I bought the cheapest 6-pack of soda that I could find, a couple of Slim Jims, and a can of Green Giant corn for the carp. Well, that left me with $1, and I decided I was going to buy one of those scratch-off lottery tickets. Well, folks, it was my lucky day. That ticket was worth $1,000. Now, I looked at that ticket, and right away, I knew there was just one of two things I could do with it. I could either take that ticket home, give it to my wife, and never see a penny of that money again. Or I could cash that ticket, spend whatever I wanted to, and tell her I won whatever was left over. Well, I cashed that ticket quicker than a Confederate dollar at Appomattox. And that joke is going to be funnier the further north you are. That cashier counted out 1,000 crisp new dollar bills. I put $20 worth of gas in the Great Golden Carp Cruiser, and I headed out to see wild, wonderful West Virginia with 980 crisp new dollar bills in my pocket. But this is where that bridge comes back into the story. Because you see, I got about a quarter way across that bridge, and I started hearing the ominous thump, thump, thump of a flat tire. Well, a flat's a flat, and there's nothing you can do but fix it. So I coasted to a stop, dead in the middle of that bridge. And I can tell you right now, that sooner or later, I'm going to buy a tire iron for that car. Because by the time I got those lug nuts off with a pair of channel locks, I was hot, tired, and mad. I was so mad that when I reached into the trunk of the car and pulled out the spare tire, I just threw it as hard as I could down on the bridge. Well, that tire bounced. It bounced about 20 feet up into the air. Came down about 2 feet from the edge of that bridge, which would have been just fine, except that it was the wrong 2 feet. I took a step over to the edge of that bridge and I watched as that tire fell 864 feet clear down to the New River, where it bounced twice and landed standing upright in 3 feet of water. Well, I looked a quarter mile to my right and 864 feet down the bank. I looked a quarter mile to my left and 864 feet down the bank. I did some quick ciphering, and I figured out that it was going to take me anywhere from 3 hours to 6 days to hike down there and get my tire. And that's provided I didn't break any bones in the process. But it was about that time that I remembered the monster stick. Now, the monster stick is my 9-foot surf casting rod, complete with 6 miles of brand new 50-pound test strand carp cord. And it occurred to me that I could simply tie a hook to the end of that line, lower it down, snag my tire, and bring it back up without ever taking a step. Well, I started to feel good again then. But I think it was probably the same sort of good feeling that John Brown had just before he put his Harper's Ferry plan into action. Because you see, everything went fine for about the first 500 feet. And then the biggest red bird I'd ever seen spotted that hook, mistook it for a descending spider, swooped in, swallowed it whole, and landed in a rhododendron bush up on the shore. Well, I thought about my mother, her bird feeders, how much she loves birds. And I tried to gently coax that bird out of that rhododendron bush. But when that didn't work, I started thinking about my West Virginia state income tax return, and how every year I'd check that box to donate $1 to the non-game wildlife fund. And I said to myself, I said, Bill, you bought that bird. You're going to have to do what you have to do. And I hauled back on the monster stick just as hard as I could. And that rhododendron bush barely erupted in a mushroom cloud of crimson feathers and red petals. And that entire blob was headed on a perfect trajectory straight for my tire when lightning struck twice. You see, a 4-foot brook trout mistook that blob for his fly of the month subscription. Came out of the water, paid cash on delivery, swallowed that whole thing, dove back in the river, swam upstream right through the hole in the middle of my tire, hit his head on a rock, did a couple of somersaults, and landed up on shore. Well, I just stood there watching to see what was going to happen next, and sure enough, before long, a big old black bear stepped out of the woods. He sniffed that fish a couple of times, and then he swallowed it whole. Well, I started to feel good again then, because I knew there was nothing in the air, nothing in the water, and nothing in the woods that was going to come and eat that bear. So I just started reeling. I reeled that bear offshore and into the water. I reeled him downstream until his head went right through the hole in the middle of my tire. Then I just started reeling up. And I just reeled and reeled and reeled. And after a while, I heard a voice behind me. Now, mind you, this was no ordinary voice. This was like when the loudspeaker goes off in school and says, Bil Lepp, please come to the office. And that fella, he said to me, he said, son, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm trying to get my tire back. He said, it looks to me like you're fishing. And I think it's safe to say that he was a mite surprised when he took a step to the edge of that bridge, looked down, and saw what I was bringing up. I think it's safe to say I was a mite surprised as well, though, because as it turns out, he was a state game warden. Well, I didn't know what else to do except to keep on reeling, so I reeled that whole mess up to the edge of the bridge. I just kind of lifted it up over. That bear just lay there. Most of the fight had gone out of him about 600 feet. That officer, he looked at that and he said, son, I don't know why you did this. He said, I don't care to know why you did this, but I can tell you you're in a heap of trouble. And he reached in his back pocket and pulled out his notepad, reached in his front pocket, pulled out his pencil, he licked it, and he commenced to write. And he wrote and he wrote and he wrote and he wrote and he wrote, pausing only long enough to ask me my name, date of birth, social security number, home address, that sort of thing. Every now and again, he'd flip a page and carry a number. And when he was finally done writing, he said to me, "Son, do you see that bear right there?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "That's a black bear." He said, "That's the state animal, the great state of West Virginia, which you have taken illegally out of season without a permit." He said, "That's a $500 fine." He said, "Do you see that fish sticking out of that bear's mouth?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "That's a brook trout." He said, "That's the state fish of the great state of West Virginia, which you have taken from a no fishing zone using illegally obtained bait." He said, "That's a $100 fine." He said, "Do you see that bird sticking out of that fish's mouth?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "That's a cardinal, son." He said, "That's the state bird of the great state of West Virginia, which you have taken from a federally protected bird sanctuary. That's a $100 fine." He said, "Do you see those flowers sticking out of that bird's beak?" I just sort of nodded my head. He said, "Those are rhododendron flowers, son." He said, "That's the state flower of the great state of West Virginia, which you have taken from a national no flower picking zone. That's a $50 fine." He said, "Do you see that tire around that bear's neck?" I just sort of nodded my head. He said, "That tire constitutes litter." He said, "That's litter which you have caused to be thrown into a national scenic waterway. That's a $200 fine." He said, "Those fines in aggregate shall total $950, payable in cash on the spot right now, or you can opt for legal confinement until such payment is made." Well, he looked at me and my old blue jeans and the great golden cart cruiser kind of teetering on three wheels there, and he said, "You look like the kind that's going to opt for legal confinement." Well, he was already looking at me like I was crazy, so when I reached for my pocket, he went for his gun. But I just pulled out that wad of crisp new $980 bills, and I counted out 950 of them for him. And he was so pleased with that he introduced me to his brother-in-law, who fixed my flat tire for the amazing low price of $28. Now, as I was heading home, I was thinking to myself that if every fishing trip was going to be that expensive, I wasn't going to be able to go all that often. But then I started thinking about my wife, and well, I've told you people this story, and I'm sure you believe every word of it. But my wife, she's the suspicious type. And if I'd gone in with this tale, she wouldn't have had none of it. So even though it's against my grain, I decided I was going to have to lie to her. So I walked in the door. She said, "How'd it go?" I said, "It went just fine." And as I was leaving the room, I reached in my pocket, pulled out those last two crisp $1 bills, and I said, "Oh yeah, I almost forgot. I won this for you in the lottery today." The end. All right. I guess we still have 10 minutes. So I'm going to tell one more story. Just a short one. So let me think how this one starts. Right. Once there was a prince. He was a mountain prince. He lived on a farm, on a mountain range, on a grange, on a mountain range. And this particular mountain prince wanted to get married. But he didn't want to marry just anybody. He wanted to marry a princess. But he didn't want to marry any princess. He wanted to marry a mountain princess. And so he said to his mama, he lives with his mama in this situation, which I think might be part of the problem. He said, "Mama, I want to meet me a real mountain princess. But there ain't any mountain princesses in the vicinity, so I'm going to go out in the world. I'm going to go to all the mountain ranges in all the world, see if I can't find me a real mountain princess." So he set out and he hiked the Himalayas and he cruised through the Caucasus. He ascended the Alps and the Appalachians. He roamed through the Rockies. He went to the Sierras to see if there were any ladies with tiaras. He went to Glass Mountain, see if anybody had just one shoe. But he couldn't find any real mountain princesses. Now, he met a couple ladies who said they were princesses, but he wasn't sure if they were really princesses, because let's face it, especially this time of year, princess costumes just aren't that expensive. So he went home and he said to his mama, "Mama, I couldn't find me no real mountain princess." He said, "I met a couple of ladies who said they were princesses, but I think they were frauds." He said, "Now I kissed some of those frauds to see if they would turn into princesses. And his mama said, "Don't kiss frauds. You'll get warts." And that night, there was a terrible storm. There was thunder and lightning and a hurricane, earthquake, tsunami, hail, all manner of whatnot. And in the midst of that, there was a knock on the front door. And the prince went and he opened the door. And there, standing on the stoop, because this is a story, was 3 beautiful, prime princesses. And he was so excited until they said, trick or treat. And then he was like, oh, shucks. But the next morning was a beautiful day, and he was out in his field doing some work. And he saw a lady coming down the road. Her hair was a mess. She was wearing a calico dress. She had on hiking boots. And she said, howdy, I'm a real mountain princess. Well, the prince wasn't sure if real princesses walked around with their hair in a mess in a calico dress with hiking boots on. But she did have a sash that said mountain princess. So he thought maybe. And he took her home, and he introduced her to his mama. He said, Mama, this here lady says she's a real mountain princess. And the mama wasn't sure either. So she took the son to the side, and she said, listen, I don't know if she's a real princess or not. We're going to test her, find out. The mama said, here's what we're going to do. She said, I want you to take 20 mattresses, and I want you to stack them up on the back of your pickup truck. And when it comes time for bed, we'll have her sleep on top of those mattresses. And if she don't notice that she's sleeping on a pickup truck, we'll know that she's a real mountain princess. And the son said, okay, Mama, just a couple of problems with that. I know we're brainstorming, so no bad ideas. But one, we ain't got 20 mattresses. He said, we have 3 mattresses, an air mattress, and one of them blow-up raft things. And the mama said, use what you got. And then he said, all right, but how is she not going to notice the pickup truck? He said, I bought that pickup truck specifically so princesses would notice me. And the mama said, how's that working out for you? But she thought about it for a minute, and she said, dust ruffle. So that night, when it came time for bed, the prince said, oh, it's time for bed. Princess, let me show you where you will be sleeping. It's out the front door, across the driveway, up this ladder, on top of this pile of mattresses. Nothing weird about that. So the princess climbed up, and she went to sleep. And when she was good and asleep, the mama gave the keys to the truck to the son. And she said, now you get in the truck and you drive. You drive uphill, you drive downhill. You go on windy roads, you go on bumpy roads. And if she don't notice she's on a pickup truck, we'll know she's a real mountain princess. And the prince said, okay, Mama, just one problem with that. If I go down a bumpy road, she's going to, and I don't want to marry a roadkill princess. And the mama said, clamp it. It's the best Beverly Hillbilly joke you're going to get this year. And she took a big ribbon, and she tied the princess to the top of the truck, and he got in, and he drove uphill, and he drove downhill, and he went on bumpy roads, and he went on windy roads. And this is a children's story, so there are obligatory puns, and here they come. He put it in 4-wheel drive so that he could ford a river, and then he had to dodge a ram, and then he drove across the tundra. And after a while, he got a little bit sleepy, and drowsy driving is dangerous driving. So he went home, and he parked the truck, and the princess was still snoring in a very unprincess-like manner. And the prince went in, and he went to sleep. And in the morning, he and his mama were eating breakfast, and the princess came in, and she said, morning, how'd y'all sleep? And they said, we slept fine, which was a lie because they didn't have any mattresses. But they said, how did you sleep? And she said, best night of sleep I ever had in my life. Whole night long, I dreamt I was riding on a bucking bronco. And then they knew that she was a real mountain princess. And the prince and the princess got married, and they lived happily ever after, sometimes in 2-wheel drive, sometimes in 4-wheel drive, but they always managed to thrive. The end, the end. Thank you very much. I'll be right back.
Well, everybody, as Bill goes off to get some water and etc., you can start to form in your mind some questions you would like to ask Bill. Bill, you were back very quickly.
There's a sink right there. So.
Well, Bill, thank you so much for the entertainment. Thank you very, very much. I'll start the questions off. You mentioned that you kind of got into telling the tall tales through the Liars Contest, watching your big brother do that. Yes?
Yes.
So I'm wondering now, and I recall from an earlier conversation, you've been now telling professionally for about 16 to 17 years. Is that correct?
It's closer to 18, but yeah.
Okay. So besides having the example of your brother telling tales and you jumping into it. Have there been any other influences in your storytelling career to help you become the very best storyteller that you are? Because you're quite prolific.
Well, nobody in my family ever told the truth. It was always up to the listener to decide what was true. You could add anything you want to a story in my family. I mean, we weren't trying to trick each other. We were just trying to make the stories better. And so I grew up in a family where I learned exaggeration from a very early age. My grandfather, Grosspapa, he grew up in Russia. He was born in 1899, fought in the Russian Revolution, came to America. And I know some of my friends, they would always say, I don't like to go see my grandparents because they always tell the same stories. Well, Grosspapa never told the same story. He might tell a story once where he and his buddy were riding their horses down the street and they saw a lady being accosted by the man, and Grosspapa's buddy would jump off and save the woman. Next time I heard that story, Grosspapa and his buddy were riding their horses down the street and a woman was being accosted by 10 men, and Grosspapa and the guy jumped off and saved the woman. The next time I heard that story, Grosspapa would be riding down the street all by himself, and there would be a woman being attacked by the entire Red Army. So stories just naturally grew in my family. And Grosspapa said to me, for example, one time that he had ridden with Lawrence of Arabia. Now, he was in that part of the world at that time. He spoke 5 languages. I thought, why not? And I believed that till, I don't know, I was probably 17 or 18. And I told a newspaper reporter that, and she put in the newspaper that he had ridden with Laurence Olivier. So we got that going for us now too. So I grew up in this family where people just said stuff. Exaggeration was okay. It was expected. Very, very funny people in my family. So I've been preparing for this my entire life. And then I always wanted to be a writer. I wanted to, publish stories, write books, that kind of thing. And that's a lot trickier to make a living at than, if you've ever tried to make a living as a writer, it's really hard. So when the Liars Contest came around, I sat down and I wrote my first story for the Liars Contest because that seemed easier than going to the library and finding a story and learning it. And I went to the Liars Contest and I think I won 2nd place my first year. And it dawned on me that if you write a story and learn to tell it, people have to listen to you unless they can't outrun you. So I started going into storytelling. And I didn't know that there was any other storytelling besides the West Virginia Liars Contest for about 8 years. This would have been 1990 to about 1998. I was writing 1 story a year for the Liars Contest. I might get invited to do a Cub Scout blue and gold banquet, make $50 or something like that. And then in 1998, we had a little tiny storytelling festival in West Virginia called the West Virginia Storytelling Festival. And they invited one nationally known storyteller, and that was Ed Stivender out of Philadelphia. And Ed, I saw Ed. He's the first professional storyteller I ever saw, and I was absolutely blown away. Had no idea you could do this for a living. Absolutely blown away by Ed. But more importantly, Ed saw me, and he gave my name to the people at the National Storytelling Festival. So in 2000, I got to do a 15-minute spot at the National Storytelling Festival as part of a thing called the Exchange Place, where they bring 6 tellers from around the country who've never had a chance to, really tell at a festival before. And that went really well. And in 2000, I got invited to be a featured speaker at the National Storytelling Festival. And then in 2003, I had a full-time job. I was preaching, and I had a full-time job working for the state. And I was doing storytelling, quite a bit of it. So I needed to kind of shed some jobs. I figured I could always go back to preaching. So, but I had this one chance to be a storyteller. So I quit preaching. And then my wife and I sort of had this 5-year plan where I was going to ease out of my full-time job and ease into full-time storytelling. But I worked for the state, so we got a new governor. So we got a new commissioner. So I got a new boss, and I didn't like him. So I quit one day, and I went home. I quit in March. We had bought a house in January, our first house. So I quit my job in March, and I went home, and I said to my wife, I have something to tell you. And she said, I have something to tell you. And she said, you go first. And I said, I quit my job. And she said, I'm pregnant. So we kind of had to make it work. And we always have treated it, you know, so it's been my full-time job now for 17 years, I guess, 18 years. And he started out as just sort of like a paid vacation was the plan. I was just going to go around the country telling stories, and she homeschooled the kids, so they came with me all the time. And we were just going to kind of let it run its course, and when it quit, I'd go back to working some real job. But fortunately, still doing it.
Congratulations on that. Because like you said, we artists do get into it for the money. So
Oh, yeah.
Congratulations for a living, working artist and having a family and supporting them. That is fabulous.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yes. So how about anyone out in our audience? Do you have a question for Bil Lepp? You can unmute or you can wave at me.
I do have a question, and it's about your technique, Bill. I was in the workshop with you previously, and you had mentioned how powerful the pause is. And so I just wanted to ask, I notice as you tell, you often swallow. And I just wonder if that's something that you absolutely need to do at that moment, or is that part of you building in a funny sort of a pause for your audience?
It's both. Part of it is I've been talking now for almost 3 hours. So that's part of it. My voice is kind of out of shape because, you know, I haven't been doing this regular like I usually do.
Okay.
So yeah, some of that is, I don't know if it's planned. I mean, I didn't write down originally, you know, pause, swallow before this point, but there are definitely pauses worked in. The Princess and the Pickup Truck story, the last one I told, is many of those jokes, and I had to tell the story a whole bunch of times so I figured this out. A lot of those jokes, I tell the whole joke, and then you have to think about it to see why the whole thing was funny. So I had to add the pauses in there so that people would have time to react to what had happened. Because a lot of my jokes, they're just funny as they're happening, and I don't have to pause for them. But especially in that story, for whatever reason, I end loaded all of the jokes or something, and so I have to pause for people to get like the. I need you to think about. He went to the Sierras to look for ladies in tiaras. Went to Glass Mountain, see if anybody had one shoe. So I have to pause there so that you can, you know, think about Cinderella and all that sort of thing. So some of them are deliberate, and some of them are just natural. And I wish I didn't do it.
Thank you.
Bill, as anyone else is formulating a question for you, do you find yourself, now that you've been performing for quite a while, do you find that you have a performing persona that is different from your everyday persona?
They're not that much different. My accent gets thicker when I'm on stage. My parents are from Ohio, so I basically speak NPR language. And so my accent thickens up a little bit when I get on stage, especially when my characters start talking. But there's, well, how do I say this? I love standing on stage and talking to people. I think that's great. It's, you know, one of my favorite places to be is on a stage with a responsive audience, me talking at them laughing at what I'm saying. When I get off stage, I don't want to talk to anybody. You know, I'm a really introverted person, actually. A lot of my fellow storytellers are too. You know, like we go back to the hotel and we huddle and hunker down where nobody can see us. We talk to each other, but so there's a little bit difference in how big of a personality I am on stage as to when I'm not. Like a lot of times I have to speak at a dinner or something like that, and hardly anybody but the person who hires me know who I am. And they're so, you know, I'm sort of forced to mingle and quiet and sort of reserved. And then I get up on stage and tell stories, and people are like, we had no idea that you were the storyteller. You seem so quiet when you were just standing there. So it's a little different, but, you know, I wear a hat and t-shirts and jeans all the time when I'm not on stage. So I'm certainly not putting a costume on to be up here. So there are similarities and there are differences.
But that's a really neat point that you make. and a real fact about yourself that when you're not performing, you're quite the introvert. And there was a comment that someone referenced you to be similar to a stand-up comedian. And we know a lot of stand-up comedians are quite introverted, and are often live more in the melancholy, not that we reference that to you, but are often have that stage persona that people would be surprised is not necessarily their day-to-day. Is there anyone in our audience that has come up with a question, or maybe any of our non-video people out there?
I just have one, and it's kind of not about storytelling per se, but I'm just wondering, during the COVID stuff, how does a professional storyteller make it? Because you're probably not making gobs and gobs of money telling gobs of stories.
It was interesting. I remember back in November when we first started to hear about the coronavirus, I said to a couple of my storytelling friends, you know, if this comes over here, we're going to be out of work. And then we did a festival in Athens. No, that's not right. Well, it doesn't matter. Florence, Georgia. That's not the name of the town. Anyway, I was in Georgia and I did a festival second weekend in March. And that's when I got in my car on March 9th and I drove home. And, you know, that's when we started to know for sure that everything was going to close down. And then just one thing after another. I mean, I have stuff scheduled certainly every weekend, and oftentimes during the week as well. So just one job after another started to cancel. And so I did what everybody did that was out of work. I applied for the first time in my life to, you know, state benefits, whatever that's called, unemployment. And they didn't recognize my job. Like that's the letter I got. We do not recognize your job. So I didn't qualify for state benefits for a long time. And then when they finally started giving it to gig workers, I was scheduled to get $157 a week. That's what they thought I was worth. And about that same time, in fact, just as I got my first check, I actually started doing something that was paying. So I had to, I mean, it took, I don't know, 4 months, I think, to get those benefits. And when I finally got them, I couldn't accept them because I had a paying gig going on. And then I did manage to get a government loan. I got one of those PPP loans, you know, a couple $1 million. Not really, but I did get a PPP loan. And but I'm working on a project right now that's been paying, so that's been nice. And but a lot of my friends, a lot of my coworkers have you know, struggled more than I do. I'm always frugal, you know. Some people, like my wife, might call me cheap, but I you know, put money in the bank, and so we made it. We're fine. Thanks for asking.
Sarah Jane, I saw that you might have a question.
Well, let me say one more thing to that.
Oh, go,
Yes,
go ahead.
A lot of things that canceled have gone online like this. And so I've done, I don't know, maybe 20 of these things, kind of Zoom things or shows with, what's her name? She was at the Liars Contest at Susquehanna, Jess Hayden, maybe? Anyway, she does a weekly online program, and then she divides the donations between the storytellers. And the National Storytelling Festival, the big one in Jonesboro, it was online just this last weekend. And one of the big ones out in Utah did everything online. So I've got 2 online festivals coming up in October. So, you know, everybody's trying to find a way.
Mm-hmm. True. I'm a theater director, and it's very strange and hard to do anything, but we still have been doing it.
Yeah.
Sarah Jane, what's your question?
Yeah, same here, by the way. I choreographed a dance and we rehearsed on Zoom and everything, and it was really weird, but okay, so here's my question. This is a really big question, so I don't expect, you know, a comprehensive answer, but I'm very curious as to where you find your inspiration for your stories. Sources.
Well, it comes from all over. A lot of them are based on little things that happened to me somewhere along the way. I was driving, I don't know, 3 years ago. My teenage daughter, she's the funniest person on the face of the earth. and has just wonderful, wonderful sarcasm. And there was a truck in front of us with like 5 mattresses just thrown in the back of it. And I said to her, do you think you could sleep on the back of that? And she said, of course I could, Dad, I'm a princess. So that's where the idea for that story came from. And then the worst Christmas ever story, that big monster of a story I told second, a lot of that is true, or a lot of that happened to somebody. My wife's father actually went out on Christmas Eve, fired the shotgun in the air, came inside and said, Santa ain't coming because I just killed Rudolph. It's hilarious. He meant it to be funny. So that happened. The thing about her going up the Smoky Mountains happened. The whole Ella Fitzgerald thing, that happened to me. And Aunt Lenore, God bless her, she's real. So the Jimmy Carter thing happened to my friend Shelley. So when I was putting that story together, I had to write a Christmas story. And so I was just trying to find different things that happened around the Christmas period that I could combine together because I needed a 30-minute story. So I was trying to figure out how I could get those ideas to form sort of a single narrative, and also looking for things I could add to it to make it longer. Actually, the Ella Fitzgerald thing, I was driving with my wife. We were somewhere in Ohio, and there was a big billboard that said, this town is the hometown of Ella Fitzgerald. And so I was driving the car, and I was telling my wife about the whole Ella Fitzgerald thing, and she wasn't saying anything. So I looked over, and she was laughing really, really hard. Now, I have to tell you that my wife is sort of immune to my humor. So when I make her laugh, I've actually said something really funny, and I was like, what, that's funny? And she's like, that's hilarious. Why aren't you telling that? So that's how that got in the story. And then just to keep the whole thing going, I invented that teacher. Actually, I'll tell you what happened with that teacher. We were going to tell somewhere that we told before. We billed this thing as a Christmas tour, and we got hired by a non-Christian, I mean, not like anti-Christian, just a non-Christian group who, even though they knew who we were, they knew their audience wasn't going to be 100% Christian. So they asked us to make it a little more inclusive, or a little less, I guess, Christian centric. So I totally invented that teacher, just so I could say Islam, Buddhism, Confucianism, Taoism, just so I could say every religion I could in the space of that little bit of time. So I could be like, I was inclusive. I just, for that particular story, it was just a matter of figuring out how I could take all these different elements, tie them together in a straight line narrative, and then have some sort of meaning at the end. So the very beginning of that, where I talk about the world being a difficult place when you're little because you have to filter things through, the beginning of that story was actually written as a result of, I think, how I wanted to end it, to talk about, just have a little thing at the end where I say, we should listen to each other, and these misunderstandings are the problem. So then I went back and loaded the front of the story with something about children misunderstanding the world, so that I could point out that each one of these difficulties was caused by a misunderstanding. And then what I tell first? Oh, the mountain lion story. I really was in California, and there really was that sign that said what to do if you got attacked by a mountain lion. And I remember picking up a big rock, and I thought, well, if a mountain lion attacks me, I'll just whack it with the rock. And then I had this thought. I thought, what would be a non-violent way to resolve a conflict with a mountain lion? So as I was hiking, I was thinking to myself what I would do if I really got attacked, if I didn't want to hurt the mountain lion. And then, so, it just all started to fall together at that point. So the ideas come from lots of different places.
Thank you.
Bill, thank you so much for this afternoon. As a banished Baptist, mountain lion fighting Unitarian, you have given me enough juice to get through this coming week's news cycle. So that is invaluable. To the bottom line, though, for the shows that you have coming up in October, Jess, for the weekly program that Bill just mentioned, is there a way that you could send out emails on how to access these events so that we can support you at a deeper level, because we're in this for a long time to come?
Oh, I said your name instead of the lady's name I was thinking of. Anyway, It's called, if you look up Better Said Than Done, I think is the storytelling company or the storytelling thing that this woman does. Why can't I think of her name? She might be in here. I'll be very embarrassed if she is. But yeah, so, and then I'm doing one, the Athens, if you go to athensstorytellingfestival.com, that's the Athens, Alabama Storytelling Festival. And it is, I believe, the last weekend in October. And there's going to be 4 or 5 or 6, I'm not sure how many storytellers telling stories. And then there's another one called I think it's the Old Stone Mill out in North Carolina that I'm involved in. But I will tell you this, this has been one of the tricky aspects of doing this is I only have so many stories. And in order to send them in to an online festival, I have to stand here like this, record them into my phone, edit them, and then upload them. So it can take me like 5 hours or longer than that if it's a big story, to get a story to a festival. Whereas if I show up at a festival, it just takes me a half hour to tell it. And because it takes so long to get all these stories, I haven't recorded very many of them. So if you see me at 2 online festivals, there's a very good chance I won't just be telling the same story. You will see the exact same video. So just keep that in mind. Don't be mad at me.
I have another question. I was wondering in the past, what kind of things did you find help or like areas of interest or ways to kind of grab audiences? And then for the future, do you have any inkling for what might work for the future?
I don't know. I've really only written 1 story this year. I've been extremely uncreative, and it's really difficult to get the new story done in the oral version because it's been really hard for me to get any audience reaction. I mean, right now I can see 3 other people, and I see you laughing, but I can't hear you, and plus I don't like to tell with my glasses on, so I can't really see you. And so it's been really hard to develop new material. And I'm hoping once we get back in front of real audiences that I'm going to start cranking out material again. So I don't know. I mean, my stories aren't going to change. The kinds of stories that I tell aren't going to change. It's always been my goal. My #1 goal is just to make the audience laugh, to feel better when the show is over than they did when they came in, give them a little 20-minute or 60-minute break from all of the other problems in the world. So that seems like a good thing to keep going. I don't think all of the problems are going to suddenly go away anytime soon. So I don't know if that answers the question, but.
Actually, Bill, to go on top of that, are you part of any kind of, for lack of a better term, a storyteller support group where you all have a monthly Zoom meeting where you can just talk and try out material and brainstorm or anything like that?
Nothing formal. I mean, there are several other storytellers with whom I'm in regular communication, and we talk about that kind of thing. But it would drive me bananas to do this every week with a bunch of storytellers.
So we have time for one final question or comment, if anyone.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm a performer where we do stories, and I'm a ventriloquist, and I'm also a part of the Puppeteers of Color in the Puppeteers of America. And a lot of us who are in that are trying to develop shows and or sketches and or stories related to this tremendous opportunity we have now to, I don't know why I choke up when I talk about this, to relate to people who haven't yet gotten the message that we're all brothers and sisters together. And we have to really support one another so that non-people of color, although white is a color if you look in the Crayola box, how to get the message across that all of us are of equal value. And I didn't know if you have any stories like that, or know of any other tellers who are doing this kind of work. I know several African-American tellers who do this kind of stuff as a living. But for those of us who are focusing on this now, I could use all the help I could get.
There's a woman, she's out of Florida now, I think, but her name is Susan O'Halloran. And Sue does a lot of, I mean, I don't know exactly what she calls it, but she does a lot of things for using story for inclusivity, for, I think, race and gender and all of those things. So if she's not doing what I'm understanding you're asking me about, she will certainly know who is. So Sue O'Halloran is the person I contact.
I've heard her name. Do you know how is it spelled?
A big O, and then what do you call it? An apostrophe, and then a big H, and I think it's Hallloran. Okay.
I'm not sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll try it both ways. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And she has a webpage, but you know, that's an interesting question. One of the things that all of the things that have been going on recently has caused me to realize is I don't have any people of color in my stories. Now, I've never said that out loud to anyone but my wife. And I never say, well, that's not true. I just said in that story that I mean, I really did spend a lot of my life in a very white Christian community, because that's was just the demographics of where I grew up. And unfortunately, that influenced my stories. And I've been wondering, I've been talking to my wife about, you know, which one of my characters who I've never said what their ethnicity is, could I just suddenly spring out without looking fake, that, oh, here's someone of color who is also in my neighborhood. So I've been struggling to make sure that I have some really strong women characters. And I'm proud of that. I think they're strong, and I like what they do. And that was important to me years ago, to make sure that I had important or strong women characters. But I never thought about adding people of color to my stories, and I don't know how to do it. I haven't figured out yet how to do it without being, you know, transparent about it, I guess. So I think somebody's going to have to move into town.
It's not easy. It's like, we live in Central Pennsylvania, where it's almost exclusively white here, and a lot of our shows work with churches and communities that are almost all white. And I'm Cheyenne, and my family is African American and Cheyenne, and so it's important for me and ventriloquists like me to share that we are all equal to people who don't like to think of us that way, even to this day. And we go to churches where there are Confederate flags hanging very near. So we know that there could be danger, but the message is so important, and we had this little window of time. So that's why it was a question I felt I had to ask. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. I understand your position.
Well, you know, I feel as a white guy from West Virginia that it would be helpful if I had a more inclusive cast, just to show that, you know, people don't expect that necessarily of 50-year-old white guys from West Virginia. So, I really want to be as open about, you know, inclusive as I can.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Appreciate it.
So this is a really great place to start to wrap up. Very timely, and it also, Bill, is just a lovely way to show how storytelling continues to evolve. And even though a lot of your stories live in fiction and aren't rooted always or primarily, the whole story is a true fact or a true incident from your life, but how storytelling continues to evolve to embrace the humanity of all the listeners. So that's really beautiful. And thank you, Bill, for sharing all of your stories that you shared today. And also thank you for sharing a little bit about you as the person, Bill, behind the teller. And now I'd like to turn it back over to Jess Hayden of the Susquehanna Folk Music Society to wrap us up and share some information. Again, thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Jess, you're muted.
There we go.
Jess, you're muted. Jess, you're muted.
Okay. All right, I tried to unmute myself, but take 3. Thank you for everyone for coming for the workshop and this afternoon and for the show. And thanks so much to Bil Lepp for his very entertaining and informative informational afternoon. And thank you for Dave for helping us out as co-host, and to Janet Bixler, thank you so much for your introductions and for moderating the Q&A. Look on our website, sfmsfolk.org, for future virtual events. And we hope to see you down the road sometime. So long, safe travels, and thank you so much.